Imagine a galaxy that watches, observes, and studies Earth from afar, expecting humanity to follow a predictable path. They see us as primitive, fragile, bound to a single planet with technology barely scratching the surface of interstellar travel. The galactic civilizations, ancient and wise, have long categorized young species like ours. They believe they understand our limits, our struggles, and the inevitable constraints of biology and physics that keep species like us contained. But then, something happens. Something so unprecedented, so utterly beyond their calculations, that it shakes the very foundation of their understanding. This is the day humans proved the galaxy wrong. It began with the whispers of a signal, a message not from the depths of space, but from Earth itself, reaching farther than it ever should have. A breakthrough in communication, a discovery that should have taken millennia, was achieved in mere centuries. The galaxy had been watching, confident that humanity would stumble upon the same barriers that hindered countless civilizations before them. Faster than light travel? Impossible for a species as young as ours. The sheer energy required, the theoretical impossibilities. It was supposed to be beyond us. And yet, we did it. It wasn't just technological advancement that caught them off guard. It was the sheer defiance of human nature, the refusal to accept boundaries imposed by physics and history. Other species had stagnated, reaching a plateau of knowledge and settling into complacency. Humans, on the other hand, had something different, an insatiable hunger, a relentless curiosity, and an ability to adapt at an unparalleled rate. The greatest minds of the galaxy debated in shock, struggling to understand how a civilization that had barely mastered spaceflight had already begun manipulating the very fabric of space-time. What the galaxy didn't account for was humanity's unique way of problem-solving, our ability to think not just in linear progression, but in disruptive, revolutionary ways. Where others saw obstacles, we saw challenges to overcome. The first hint of this came when human scientists discovered a loophole in the very fabric of physics, a way to bend space in a manner previously dismissed as fantasy. The equations were there, buried in the theoretical works of long-gone physicists, dismissed by even our own kind as impractical. But then, a breakthrough. Energy harnessed in a way that defied conventional understanding. A drive unlike anything seen before. The first true step toward interstellar travel, not in thousands of years, but within decades of breaking free from our own planet. The galaxy's mistake was underestimating not just our intelligence, but our audacity. The first human ship to leave the solar system using this new drive wasn't a massive government project. It was a collection of independent scientists, rogue engineers, and visionaries who refused to wait for bureaucracy to catch up. While other species spent centuries debating and refining their theories, we took risks. The result? A vessel that pierced the void, sending shockwaves across the galactic community. It was impossible. It was reckless. And it worked. Panic spread among the old empires, the so-called advanced civilizations who had once viewed Earth as a mere curiosity. The idea that a species so young, so chaotic, could accomplish what had taken them eons was unfathomable. Some believed it to be a fluke, an anomaly that would correct itself. Others saw the terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't just accelerating, we were surpassing. And for the first time, the ancient powers felt something they had not experienced in ages. Fear. The shock deepened when humans, instead of cautiously stepping into the wider galaxy with humility, did the unthinkable. We reached out. Not for approval, not for guidance, but as equals. We sent transmissions not asking for help, but offering solutions, proposing alliances. A species that had been expected to remain in the shadows suddenly stood at the doorstep of the great empires, not as students, but as challengers. And what truly baffled them was our resilience. The countless wars, the conflicts, the setbacks that should have destroyed us had instead forged something terrifyingly unstoppable. A species that did not break under pressure, but thrived in it. Then came the final, undeniable proof that humanity was unlike anything they had ever encountered. When the first diplomatic meeting was arranged, representatives of the oldest galactic civilizations prepared to meet these upstarts from Earth, expecting naive, awed creatures overwhelmed by the grandeur of the greater galaxy. Instead, they found beings who had already studied their languages, cracked their encryption, and understood their technology with alarming precision. Humans had learned more in a few short years than others had in millennia. And when asked how we had achieved the impossible, the answer was simple: because we had no other choice, because we refused to accept limitations, because we were human. That was the moment the galaxy realized its mistake. They had expected us to follow the same patterns, to be bound by the same limitations that had held back countless species before us. They had believed we would take the safe path, the slow path. But humans were different. We didn't just break the rules, we rewrote them. And as the first human fleet prepared to venture beyond the known systems, the galaxy could do nothing but watch, knowing that everything had changed forever. As the human fleet prepared to venture beyond the known systems, the galaxy watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. For eons, the ancient empires had assumed they were the pinnacle of civilization, the architects of cosmic order. Now, that belief was crumbling. The humans had not just arrived on the interstellar stage, they had shattered every expectation, forcing the galaxy to reconsider everything it thought it knew about progress, intelligence, and the natural order of things. But the real shock was yet to come. It wasn't just our technology or our rapid advancement that terrified the galactic powers, it was our mindset. Unlike other species that expanded cautiously, treating each new discovery with reverence and hesitation, humanity operated with an almost reckless determination. We were explorers, warriors, and problem solvers all at once. We didn't fear the unknown. We sought it out, challenged it, bent it to our will. That made us unpredictable. And in a galaxy ruled by ancient traditions and rigid hierarchies, unpredictability was dangerous. The first test of our defiance came when we encountered the Dominion, a vast bureaucratic empire that had long controlled access to critical star lanes. They had expected us to request permission, to integrate slowly, to prove our worth over centuries. Instead, we mapped our own paths, bypassed their restrictions, and developed new methods of travel that made their monopoly obsolete. What had taken them thousands of years to establish, we dismantled in mere decades. They responded with threats, warnings, demands that we adhere to the established order. But humanity had never bowed to authority simply because it was old. We had spent our entire history challenging empires, tearing down regimes that sought to dictate our fate. The Dominion quickly learned that humans did not negotiate from a position of weakness. When they tried to blockade our expansion, we found new ways to break through. When they attempted sabotage, we adapted, rebuilt, and improved. The harder they pushed, the faster we evolved. But it was not just defiance that made us exceptional. It was our resilience. The first true interstellar war between humanity and the galaxy's old powers began not because we sought conquest, but because they feared what we represented. To them, we were chaos incarnate, an existential threat not because of our weapons, but because of our ideas. The belief that nothing was impossible, the refusal to accept stagnation, the audacity to reshape the universe in our own image. The war was supposed to be swift. The Dominion had faced countless rebellions before and crushed them with ease. They saw us as an upstart species, still fresh from our homeworld, lacking the discipline and experience of a true galactic power. They underestimated us in the same way history's fallen empires had underestimated the rebels, revolutionaries, and underdogs of the past. They had greater numbers, superior fleets, and centuries of tactical experience. But what they lacked was the human spirit, the ability to adapt in real time, to turn weaknesses into strengths, to take losses and transform them into lessons. Every battle they fought against us, we studied, learned, and innovated at a pace that defied logic. Their victories were temporary. Our victories were permanent. The galaxy's greatest strategists struggled to understand how we were surviving, let alone winning. No single technology gave us the edge. No secret weapon turned the tide. It was something far more terrifying to the old empires, our ability to think differently. We broke their formations with unconventional tactics. We turned civilian technology into weapons of war. We coordinated in ways they never expected, treating every soldier, every pilot, every engineer as an individual contributor to the grander strategy, not just another expendable piece in a cosmic chess game. And most of all, we never fought fair. When they predicted a head-on engagement, we flanked them. When they braced for orbital bombardment, we struck from within. Every rule of war they had relied on for centuries, we rewrote in a matter of years. Then came the moment that would shake the foundations of the galaxy forever. In the midst of the conflict, as the Dominion prepared to unleash their greatest weapon, a fleet of planet-cracking dreadnoughts designed to force our surrender, human scientists achieved what had once been considered impossible. A final breakthrough in energy manipulation, a discovery that took us beyond simple, faster-than-light travel. The ability to not just move through space, but to control it, to fold it, to reshape it, to weaponize it in ways that defied every known law of physics. The moment the first human ships disappeared and reappeared instantaneously across vast distances, the war was over. Not because we had destroyed the Dominion, but because we had rendered them irrelevant. The greatest strength of their empire, their control over space, their domination of the trade routes, their power over travel itself, was now meaningless. The other empires watched in stunned silence as the war came to an abrupt and undeniable conclusion. Humanity did not conquer. We did not annihilate. We simply changed the rules of the game, so completely that the old powers no longer had any control. The Dominion surrendered not out of weakness, but out of inevitability. And in that moment, the galaxy realized the true nature of the human threat. It was not our weapons, our fleets, or our armies. It was the simple, terrifying truth that we refused to accept limits. For the first time in galactic history, an empire fell not because of external invasion, but because it had become obsolete. The rest of the galaxy watched in fearful anticipation, expecting humanity to demand tribute, to establish dominion over the ruins of our enemies. But we did not claim the throne. We had no interest in ruling. We had already set our sights on something far greater. Something the ancient species of the galaxy could scarcely comprehend. We weren't here to conquer the past. We were here to forge the future. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, its ancient empires struggling to comprehend the new reality. Humanity had done the impossible, not by brute force, not by sheer numbers, but by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outpacing civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. The fall of the Dominion was just the beginning. The balance of power had shifted irreversibly, and the other great powers had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humanity had not just joined the galactic community. We had become its defining force, but what we did next was what truly separated us from every species that had come before. The galaxy expected us to take control, to impose our will as every rising power in history had done before. They had seen this cycle play out countless times. A new empire emerges, dismantles the old order, and establishes itself as the new ruler. But humanity had no interest in repeating the past. We were not conquerors. We were something far more dangerous. Pioneers. We did not seek dominion over the known galaxy. We sought the unknown itself. While the great empires scrambled to rebuild their shattered hierarchies, humanity did the unthinkable. We abandoned the notion of empire entirely. We had no desire to rule stagnant bureaucracies, no patience for outdated traditions. Instead, we focused our efforts on the frontier, the uncharted regions beyond the established star lanes, the places other civilizations had deemed unreachable or too dangerous to explore. What the galaxy had long feared about us was now undeniable. We were never meant to be confined. We were never meant to be part of someone else's order. We were builders of new worlds, seekers of new possibilities. And for the first time, the stars themselves seemed within our grasp. The first great migration of humanity into deep space was not an exodus, it was an evolution. New colonies sprang up in places no one thought habitable. Space itself, once seen as a vast and empty void, became a canvas for our ambition. We built cities in orbit, habitats on asteroids, entire artificial worlds floating in the darkness. Where others had seen limitations, we saw endless potential. Our mastery of space manipulation allowed us to move beyond the constraints that had bound the galaxy's oldest empires for millennia. To us, borders were meaningless. The galaxy was no longer a collection of territories to be fought over. It was a vast frontier waiting to be claimed by those bold enough to step forward, and yet, not everyone embraced the future. There were those who still feared us, who saw our rapid expansion as a threat to the fragile stability they had spent so long maintaining. Alliances formed in the shadows, whispers of coalitions determined to contain humanity before we reshaped the cosmos beyond recognition. But they misunderstood us. They assumed we sought control, that we wanted power. The truth was far more terrifying to them. We didn't seek to control the galaxy. We sought to surpass it. As the years passed, the legends of humanity spread across the stars. We became a paradox in the eyes of the old powers, a species that had defied all expectations, that had rewritten the rules, but that had no interest in ruling over others. We shared knowledge freely, offered technologies that other civilizations had hoarded for themselves. Where the great empires had built walls, we built bridges. Where they saw threats, we saw opportunities. And that was what made us unstoppable. The greatest fear of the old order had come true. We had made their ways obsolete. We had not just advanced. We had outgrown them, but our greatest challenge was yet to come. As we expanded ever further into the unknown, we began to uncover things that had long been buried in the darkness. Ruins of civilizations far older than any recorded in galactic history. Artifacts that defied even our most advanced understanding of physics. Signs that humanity was not the first species to push beyond the edges of the known universe. The galaxy had always assumed that they were the pinnacle of existence, that the empires they had built were the highest form of civilization. But the truth was far more unsettling. There had been others before them, and something had happened to them. Humanity, for all our achievements, for all our defiance, now stood on the precipice of a new mystery. The old powers watched us with a mix of fear and fascination, no longer seeing us as upstarts, but as the vanguard of something greater. They knew that wherever we went, change would follow. That we would uncover secrets that had been buried for eons. That we would face the unknown not with fear, but with the same relentless determination that had brought us this far. And so, as the first human expedition prepared to venture beyond the last known star systems, the galaxy could do nothing but watch, knowing that whatever lay beyond the void, humanity would face it head-on. We had proven them wrong before, and we would do it again, because that is what it means to be human, to never stop, to never accept the limits imposed upon us, to reach for the impossible and make it real. This was not the end of our story. It was only the beginning. The edge of the known universe had always been a concept, an abstract boundary drawn by civilizations too fearful to step beyond. But for humanity, it was something else entirely, a challenge, an invitation. The great empires of the galaxy watched in silent anticipation as the first human expedition crossed the last mapped star system, venturing into the true unknown. They expected hesitation, caution, a careful approach to the mysteries ahead. But they still didn't understand what made us different. We didn't slow down. We accelerated. The ship leading the expedition was the Vanguard, a vessel unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just a warship, though it had the firepower to challenge entire fleets. It wasn't just a research vessel, though its sensors could scan anomalies that others wouldn't dare approach. It was something more, a testament to human ingenuity, built for one purpose, to go where no one else had ever gone before. And at its helm were the best minds humanity had to offer. Scientists, explorers, engineers, soldiers. Those who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Those who had no intention of turning back. The first few weeks beyond the known galaxy were eerily silent. Star systems untouched by intelligent life stretched before them. Planets unclaimed. Celestial phenomena that had never been recorded. For the first time, humanity was truly alone. But as always, we adapted. We built outposts, mapped the void, transformed the unknown into something we could understand. Every world we set foot on became another foothold in the great expansion. Every system we explored became another step in a journey that had no end. And then, something changed. A signal. Faint, distant, but unmistakably artificial. It wasn't human. It wasn't from any known species. It was ancient, far older than the oldest records in galactic history. The Vanguard altered course immediately, following the signal to a dying star surrounded by shattered worlds. The system had once been home to something vast, something powerful. But now, all that remained were ruins. Massive structures floated in the darkness, their surfaces scarred by weapons unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. This wasn't just a graveyard. It was a battlefield. The remnants of a war fought long before the first human had ever looked up at the night sky. As the team descended onto one of the largest structures, they found something that made even the most fearless among them pause, a warning. Carved into the very walls of the ruin, etched in a language that should have been impossible to translate. And yet, as if the message itself had been designed to be understood by any who found it, the meaning was clear. We were the first to challenge the void. We were the first to reach beyond. And we were the first to fall, turn back before it is too late. It was a message from a civilization that no longer existed. A species that had once stood where humanity now stood, looking into the abyss and daring to step forward. But they had not survived. Something had destroyed them. Something powerful enough to erase them from history itself. The team debated what to do next. Some argued that this was a warning they could not ignore, that perhaps for the first time, humanity had reached a limit it was not meant to cross. But others knew that turning back was not an option. Because if there was something out there, something powerful enough to end an entire civilization, then humanity needed to know what it was. And more importantly, we needed to know if it was still out there. The Vanguard pressed forward, deeper into the ruins, searching for answers. And then they found it. Not just another message, not just more wreckage, but something far more chilling. A signal, stronger than the first. It was not a distress call. It was not a beacon. It was a response. Something had heard them. And now, it was coming. The moment the signal was received, every alarm on the Vanguard came alive. It wasn't interference. It wasn't a random burst of radiation. It was deliberate, calculated, a response, and it was getting closer. The crew scrambled into action, scanning for the source. But there was no single point of origin. The signal was everywhere, echoing through the fabric of space itself, as if reality had been warped to deliver a single message. No words, no symbols, just a pulse, steady and methodical, growing stronger with every passing moment. It wasn't just a response. It was an approach. Then the lights flickered. Not just on the Vanguard, but across every system they had deployed in the ruins. Power drained from their equipment in waves, as if something unseen was siphoning their energy. Instruments malfunctioned. Quantum processors that had never failed before locked up, unable to process the incoming data. The ship's artificial intelligence, designed to withstand the most hostile environments, began looping nonsensical error codes. It was as if the very laws of physics were bending under an unseen force. And then, for the first time in human history, we saw them. It began as distortions in space, rippling like heat waves against the void. Not ships, not machines. Something else. Something that defied every understanding of existence. They did not arrive through hyperspace. They did not emit radiation, signatures. They simply manifested. Silhouettes of darkness against the stars. Shifting forms, their edges flickering between dimensions, as if reality itself was struggling to contain them. They were vast, larger than any ship, any station. No metallic hulls, no engines, no weapons in any conventional sense. Just sheer, unfathomable presence. The crew of the Vanguard stood in silence, watching as the entities moved. But they weren't moving through space in the way ships did. They were moving through something else, stepping between layers of existence that should not have been possible. Every instinct, every primal part of the human mind screamed that these things should not be here, that they were not part of this universe. Then the whispering began, not through comms, not through sound, but directly into their minds, a voice, or something resembling one, pressing against the barriers of human thought. It did not speak in language, but in raw concepts, emotions, flashes of meaning so overwhelming that some dropped to their knees, clutching their heads. You are not the first. The words, if they could be called that, slammed into them with a force greater than any weapon. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. And then they saw it. The truth. The ruins they had discovered were not the remains of a single lost civilization. They were the remnants of many. Across countless cycles, across the eons, species had risen, had expanded, had reached beyond the known. And one by one, they had been erased. Not conquered, not enslaved, erased. The entities did not seek war. They did not seek diplomacy. To them, intelligence itself was a threat. Consciousness was a flaw in the design of the universe. Every civilization that had reached this point had been culled. Every species that had dared to question the void had been undone. And now, it was humanity's turn. The signal intensified. The Vanguard systems failed entirely. The entities closed in. There was no negotiation, no chance for surrender, only inevitability. And then, at the brink of annihilation, something happened that none of the entities had foreseen, something that had never happened before. Humanity fought back. The moment the Vanguard systems failed, the entities advanced. They did not attack with weapons. They did not fire beams of energy or launch swarms of drones. Their very presence was the weapon. Reality warped around them, logic twisted. Time itself seemed to shudder. The crew felt it in their bones. A force reaching beyond the physical, pressing into their minds, unraveling everything that made them human. The entities had done this before, many times, to many species. But this time was different, because humanity had spent its entire existence defying the impossible. The first to react was Commander Elias Voss. He was no scientist, no researcher. He was a soldier, and he had spent his career preparing for threats that had no name. His mind, trained to resist interrogation, torture, even neural disruption, did something unexpected. It rejected the intrusion. He fought back, not with weapons, but with sheer force of will. And as he did, something in the entity's influence fractured. The whispering in his mind became distorted, like static breaking apart a perfect signal. He clenched his fists and roared, not in fear, but in defiance. And then, the impossible happened. The whispering stopped. Not just for him, but for the entire crew. Where other species had crumbled beneath the weight of the entity's presence, humanity resisted. We adapted. The very thing that had allowed us to survive on Earth's harsh landscapes, to master fire, to endure wars, plagues, and extinction-level threats. That same survival instinct now turned against the entities. The human mind, chaotic, unpredictable, refused to break. Dr. Lena Asaro, the Vanguard's lead physicist, saw an opportunity. The entities weren't attacking them with energy or matter. They were using perception, consciousness itself as a weapon. And if the human mind could resist, then maybe it could fight back. She activated the ship's last working experimental system, a neural amplifier designed to enhance human cognition for deep space calculations. But now, she turned it into something else, a weaponized feedback loop. If the entities wanted to invade the human mind, then they would experience something they had never encountered before. Chaos. She flooded the amplifier with human emotion. Fear, rage, hope, love, memories of billions of lives, of triumphs, of defeats, of every contradiction that made humanity what it was. She turned the collective noise of the human experience into a storm and pushed it outward. The effect was immediate. The entities recoiled. For the first time they hesitated. Their forms, once shifting with terrifying fluidity, now flickered with instability. They had faced civilizations that were orderly, structured, predictable. But they had never faced anything like us. A species built on contradiction. A species that could feel fear and still charge into battle. That could experience despair and still refuse to surrender. That could be fragile, yet unbreakable. And then came the final blow. Deep in the ruins, hidden beneath layers of forgotten wreckage, something awoke. A structure long buried. A machine, a beacon, a remnant of the ones who had come before. The entities had not erased it completely. And now, sensing the resistance, it activated. The ruins weren't just a warning. They were a trap. A pulse surged outward, not of energy, but of memory. The last thoughts of the fallen civilizations, their final defiance, their last desperate stand, preserved in the very fabric of the ruins. And in that moment, humanity was no longer alone. The weight of countless lost voices surged into the entities, overwhelming them. They had silenced entire species before, erased them as if they had never existed. But they had never faced the echo of those they had destroyed. The past struck, them like a tidal wave, billions of minds screaming in defiance across the void. The entities faltered. Their forms, once vast and incomprehensible, began to disintegrate. They were not gods. They were not invincible. They were an old force, one that had gone unchallenged for too long, and now, for the first time, they were afraid. The vanguard seized the moment. Engines roared back to life, weapons powered up, and with a final surge of human ingenuity, the ship escaped. The ruins collapsed behind them, sealing away whatever ancient mechanism had been unleashed. The entities, wounded, withdrew, not defeated, but changed. For the first time in untold millennia, they had encountered something that did not crumble before them. Something that did not fit into their perfect cycle. Something that would not obey. Humanity had not just survived. We had broken the pattern. As the vanguard crossed back into known space, a final message echoed through the darkness. Not from the entities, but from the ruins, from the ones who had fallen before. It was a message that had waited countless ages to be heard. You are the first to stand. Do not be the last. The galaxy would never be the same again, because humanity had proven, once and for all, we do not fear the void, we become it. Please subscribe this channel for getting more interesting stories like this. Request to please support us.